and welcome to our October user group meetup. We have a new module from Sam. He will guide us through his module PSPreworkout. Just a little bit about myself. I'm Konstantin. I do very, very much things with PowerShell. This is my Twitter handle. This is the Twitter handle of the user group. If you want, you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Just if you want to submit a session, I have CFPs on Sessionize. You can add something to, or you can submit a session, and I will get in contact with you if it fits, and you can make some wishes when you want to have the session. We can also reschedule if you don't have time. So just some advertisements. On the 15th of October, so next Tuesday, there will be the PowerShell Conference Europe Minicon. It's a free event that's in the Gather workspace. And yeah, we have some sessions with the PowerShell team and also Gail, and so Gail Colas, the organizer of PSConf is there, and Barbara and Rob Sewell are also speaking. So just to show the schedule, it will start at 5 p.m. CEST. Quick welcome. Then it's not a technical session. It's a bit of a everyone screw up lessons from the so-called experts. So they will tell you, okay, you definitely can screw up. It's nothing is wrong with this. Then Gail will do some live coding, so he will show you how to start a module from scratch. I think show his sampler module and do a presentation how to create functions, classes, how to trigger an API, and write advanced functions and so on. And the next track, you will have PS Resource Get, and with Sydney Smith, PM on the PS Resource Get team or module. What's new in 7.5? In PowerShell 7.5, Jason Helmick, PM, and Sean Wheeler. Sean Wheeler is a PM on the Docs team. They will tell you what's new in 7.5. Then we have desired state configuration version 3 from Michael Green, principal program manager from Microsoft, and PlatyPS redesign. PlatyPS is the module how you can generate your help, your updatable help, your markdown help, your and this will get a redesign. Jim Truer, one of the founders of the PowerShell team, will present. So just to give you an overview, what is going to happen next Tuesday, and yes. So session will be recorded. Mute your microphone. I think everyone muted. Perfect. Thank you for being here all. And I will monitor the chat. So if anyone has any questions, I will read the question out. If you are willing, you can also unmute your microphone. And I think Sam does not have anything against it if you interrupt him and ask the question.
Please do.
Yeah. And I also will monitor the chat and also ask some questions. Good. And today's speaker is Sam. Is it the last name Erde or Erde, or because in our language the last name is called Earth. In yes. So I'm very curious. So good. I will. The stage is yours. Just introduce yourself, what you are doing, and then you can start. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Konstantin. I'm a little embarrassed to say my name because I do recognize its origin in your language, but I also know that my family, for whatever reason, a few generations ago, started pronouncing it as Erde, and I'm pretty sure that's not how the original pronunciation should be. So apologies for that. But we'll go on, I guess. But yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to join you all. And if you like to, I would love it if you want to turn your cameras on. I stare at initials all day in Teams because I'm always on call, and it's nice to see faces. And some of your names are familiar from maybe Twitter or GitHub. So it's nice to be able to maybe put a voice to some of those faces too. But otherwise, again, feel free to interrupt, unmute, or just in chat whenever you want. And I'll share my screen as we go. And a little bit of an introduction about myself. Make sure my slides work.
Yes.
And get Teams out of the way. Wonderful. So this is me. I've been married to an amazing wife for almost 19 years now. 2 young, active boys, and they have the day off from school today. So you might hear laughing, yelling, maybe even screaming when they start fighting. If you have kids, you know what I mean.
That's the work from home lifestyle. So yeah,
that is the work from home lifestyle, for better or worse.
Yeah.
But community is very important to me, whether it's my family, my neighbors, church, or this awesome community that we have around PowerShell. It's really fun. I've been working in IT for a little over 20 years, and I'm currently at a company called Sentinel Technologies, based out of Chicago here in the US. And we do a lot of Microsoft work, project work, managed services, security, and whatnot. I've always been kind of the Microsoft guy wherever I work, just due to my focus on Active Directory, Exchange Server, Entra ID, 365, Defender, and of course, PowerShell. But the community's just taught me so much over the years, and it gives me a lot of joy to try to give back to others and hopefully, just continue learning together. So I threw this photo in here because I am pretty active on GitHub and Twitter, so that might look familiar. Those are the best places to connect with me. And just for context, this is where I live. I'm in North Carolina, thankfully safe from the storms that have been coming through lately. But I am from the state of Maine, a little farther north originally. And it actually kind of reminds me, back in 2002, I had the pleasure of visiting München for a couple of days. Wish it could have been longer, and it felt like a familiar space. And really enjoyed that there. So here's just a kind of a highlight of what I'll run through my introduction, the PSPreworkout module, and talking about building while we learn, or learning while we build, and whatever's next. And so I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball at myself and at you. I originally started writing kind of some slides as just a walk through the module itself. And I realized for me, creating this module was a journey of really learning a ton of things that I maybe didn't even plan on learning. And I'd like to turn this presentation into something that talks about PowerShell and PSPreworkout, but maybe is more about just engaging in that cycle of learning as we build and using that learning and just working smarter and repeating that cycle. So I started yesterday rewriting half my slides, and it's not done yet, so I'm going to go off script at some point, but we can just focus on the fun code at that point. But I do welcome your feedback, and I hope the idea works for you all. So yeah, we'll talk about what PSPreworkout is, why I called it that, and what it does. But first, in kind of the mindset that I got into, I'm actually missing some, here we go. I wanted to just ask the group a few questions to get into that conversation about learning, and ask what style of learning works for each of you. And you don't have to answer, but it'd be cool if you want to put it in the chat or just speak up. Do you like taking a course? Do you like to just dive in and start doing stuff and learn as you go, or read a book or watch videos?
Yeah, so maybe do a show of hands if you are a visual learner, so you learn through video, or you're more of an on-site person, all of the above. Perfect.
Well, yeah.
You're more of an on-site person, so hearing learner or visual stuff. Love to try out new stuff. Yeah, visual and doing. Yeah.
I'm the same. For me, a big thing is I love to read about topics, but I don't often learn it until I just try to do it myself. Yeah. And this is one of those stories. This was actually the first module I created myself. I've contributed to others, but I needed to learn what's the process of making and publishing a module. And so I dove into that and looking at a few different frameworks for modules. There's a few that I enjoy for different purposes. I started with PS Publish module, which some of you may have tried. It's put out by his nickname is Shemek, also known as Evotech, and he's done a lot of great stuff. But there's another one that is a lot more complex, also fun to work with, called Contesta. And that one brings in the invoke build module, platypus, MK docs, and it's a whole CD like framework that can do everything as well. So neat, but that one gave me a big learning curve too. So, kind of the next question is, how do you begin working on a project it is that you've not done before? This might be the same answer. You might just dive in, or you might study it for a while first and then try it out.
I think also adding to this is because we have AI at a prompt sometimes. So
yeah,
you go to ChatGPT or to GitHub Copilot and say, okay, I want to have this and this and this. Yeah. And then you end up with the code, and then you try, okay, how can I read this in a professional way, and so on. So
agreed.
That I think will be also because me and my colleagues are also trying things out and so on, and gives you ideas or stuff that you don't even think of building or trying. So yeah,
it's really nice to help you get unstuck, or maybe try to find a different technique for solving a problem.
Yeah,
but so this one I do want your answers. How do you keep perfectionism from holding you back? Because I go deep on this one, and I often spend way too much time perfecting tiny pieces, and I feel like I can't release it or I can't publish it up until it's just right. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to force myself to put that perfectionism behind me and just put it out there. But how many of you also have that challenge when you are writing code?
Speaking for me, not so much, because I am mostly in a safe space where my colleagues give me feedback. So that's a bit better, or not so brutal if you give it out to the public. And yes, some feedback will be horrible and some feedback will be good. So you have to learn to definitely deal with those feedback. So that's definitely
that is true. That is true.
Yeah, but I haven't heard this. Yeah, but have to try and remember and practice iteration. Yeah, that definitely.
Howard, that's a great statement to add, because one of the things that I wanted to try to remember is this cycle that project managers have told me many times in the past, and it's to do this loop called plan, do, study, act. And we could use different words for it, but the concept is the same. I might get stuck in the plan and the early parts of do. And so with PSPreworkout and my other code, I'm trying to spend just enough time in plan and really more of the do and the act, and learning to recognize when I'm stuck on one of these cycles. And I also do have a couple of colleagues who are very good at telling me, Sam, just get it out the door. just ship it.
Yeah, because you have to start. But if you are in a good community and they will provide you valid feedback, then it's definitely good. So having a open source project, I think, can give you advantages, because if someone is willing to extend the product, then it's also a cool opportunity for you also to learn what the other person is doing. So
it sure is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll jump to that. Since you mentioned that, when I first published this, I was very fortunate that Jeff Hicks saw my post, and fortunate that he had free time that afternoon, and he jumped in and actually looked at my code, and he submitted discussions, issues, and comments, and walked me through some really great feedback. And I learned from that, and he didn't have to. I know he still gets paid to teach people PowerShell, but he was willing to take the time, and I'm very grateful for that. And I hope that I, can do the same thing for other people at some point too. So I'm here to, share what I've learned, but also encourage everyone to do that whenever possible. It can take a lot of time.
Cool.
So the actual module, PSPreworkout, it's just a simple collection of functions that I wrote to help save time while working in PowerShell. It has some shortcuts for commands that I often forget, wrappers for work that I do on a regular basis, and some functions to help set up my environment when I'm on a new computer or a new profile. So why did I call it that, though? I don't know if anyone else picked up on either the image or the term. You might, if you exercise a lot or do weightlifting, they say that naming things is one of the hardest functions in IT. So I tried to keep it simple, but the idea came to me one day when I was mixing up some pre-workout powder to drink before going to exercise at the gym. And I thought, what if I could make a module that gives my PowerShell work the same kind of boost that this drink is giving me to go work out? So it felt like a fun idea, and I went with it. And beyond that, as you can see here, high level, I'm hoping to save time, hoping to make my work more consistent, maybe get better performance. And again, part of this was just an experiment to force myself to learn things. So here we are. I'm gonna go straight to the time savings and performance and talk about profile load time. So that was my profile I just scrolled by. It's not the longest in the world, but it's not short either. And I was inspired by some lessons from one of Sean Wheeler's talks about profiles and optimizing it. And a key thing that he talked about was putting helper functions in your profile and moving utility functions out into modules. And his reason for that was, the more you put in your profile, the longer it might take for you to get to a working prompt. Whereas if you have functions in a module, it'll still auto import whenever you need it, it's a great balance, I thought. So he defined a helper function as essentially anything that helps set up your profile to look and work the way that you want to. Whereas a utility function would be anything that you invoke later in your session while you're actually doing your work. An example of a helper function in my profile is one that sets up transcription to start automatically and then stop saving the file whenever PowerShell closes. And a utility function might be one that just deletes all files older than 30 days from my temp folder. So that helped motivate the creation of this module as well, to put some of my utility functions into a module.
And also, you don't have the danger if you redistribute something and the person does not have your profile. That's why I I don't extend my profile so much because I don't like it to have everything in my profile and that my session is full and evolved, and then I give it to someone else, and this one says, yeah, it doesn't execute. Oh, yeah, okay, I have to give you my profile. Not the best solution. Yeah.
I agree. I try to not put things that I depend on in my profile and keep it just to preferences or things for my session. So I think it'd be fun to have a user group session someday where we just compare profiles and look at, what do you have in yours? What's in yours? There's always something neat that you've never seen before. So, and there's no shame in stealing profile snippets.
Yeah.
All right. So one of the things that I learned as I was working on a module called Locksmith with some other people, it's a module that checks your Active Directory certificate services for insecure cert templates, and they can easily turn into domain compromise, and it also looks for auditing on your CAs. So I was working with 2 other guys on that, and I found that not everyone uses VS Code. Some people still use the ISE. Not everyone uses Windows Terminal. Not everyone uses PowerShell 7, or they might not all install nerd fonts, which, by the way, if you haven't, I highly recommend them. But that's another conversation, maybe a profile conversation. So on my machine, I had uninstalled the ISE because I'm all VS Code. But one of my friends actually uses it and said, Sam, your code doesn't work in the ISE. We need to fix it. And he was proved right when I was working at another client who was doing all of their work in the ISE. So I had to reinstall it. And one of the scripts that we have in this module is simply installing PowerShell ISE if you've removed it. And there's also a little bit to handle a Windows Update issue that some people had run into, I found in the forums, where you have to stop the Windows Update process and install it and then re-add it. So that's in there, and we can look at the code a little bit, but it's the ISE. And the other neat thing that right now is actually kind of on my to-do list is looking at Windows Terminal. I also threw this in at the last minute. I'm running Windows Terminal usually in PowerShell 7, but I have all the stuff in my profile, and I have nerd fonts installed, which means some things render in a nice way, but if you don't have it, it doesn't render nicely. So a little tip of the matting is I actually have Windows Terminal profiles that have no nerd font enabled and no PowerShell profile enabled. And I learned through the process of building this module and Locksmith that it can be really helpful to have that set up to test in. So right now I have a function that creates a backup of my Windows Terminal configuration. I'm thinking on my to-do list, I might actually add a function for people who want to create these Windows Terminal profiles that the script can just add them for you.
So there is a module for customizing Windows Terminal also. So you should
is there?
Take a look. Yeah, there's definitely a module.
All right, neat. Yeah, you'll have to drop that on the notes so I can check it out.
Definitely. I will search it off screen and share it in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few things that I found here that I wanted to solve a problem or make something happen, and sometimes it's already a module that exists, and the nerd in me is always torn. Part of me still wants to write it myself anyway. But yeah, I'm trying to be better with my time, be more effective with my time, and learn to use stuff that's already written. Actually, so one example, looking at this slide in particular, I was thinking about writing a module to install nerd or a script to install nerd fonts. And I found an amazing script has already been written by Julian Pawlowski. and I'm sorry if I pronounce his name wrong, but I think he's actually over in your area, so maybe you already know him. But I'll share a link. He's got a beautiful function to install nerd fonts. It's interactive and clickable. So yeah, shout out to him for that one. And so this is one of my slides that's a work in progress, where I'm reminding myself that sometimes this process is more important than the product. And I'm gonna skip that one for now because I don't have notes, but all right, two of the first functions that I wrote for this module are kind of silly. Does anyone have commands that for some reason you just can never remember the syntax to use? For me, the really like silly example is listing environment variables. It's dumb. It's only 9 characters, but for some reason I always type it wrong. And so I decided one day I'm gonna just make my own functions to get and set environment variables. And you shouldn't have to do it because there's already the shortcut using the PS drive provider. And then there's also the .NET methods, which actually is what I built my function around. So do I want to go to the code now, or I'll go to the code in a few minutes. But again, I just kind of wanted to touch on the fact that this was a great learning opportunity for me because it was great practice to learn more about using .NET types in PowerShell scripts, which I love doing now because you can, a lot of the functionality is already built for you. And in some cases, it can even be faster. While I was doing that, I also learned that the target of these environment variables goes beyond just user and machine, but also the process can have its own variables. And that's old news, I'm sure, to most people, but for some reason I always glossed over that fact. So I've got 2 functions to set and get environment variables, and it's a very long name, so I created aliases, GEV and SEV, to do that with, and now it's not so long. So I think we'll do one more slide before looking at some code and some examples. 3 more functions that I made just in the same theme. Initialize PS environment configuration is where I threw a way to quickly configure all of my required and preferred settings for PowerShell, for Git, for all my posh, setting my theme there because you have to have that, a nice font, a nice prompt, and a function to create new scripts from a template. Because I try to always use an advanced function. I try to always use good comment-based help in there because it helps me later when I try to understand what it's for, what I did, but also anyone that's using it. You know, sometimes code's hard to follow, but if there's good examples, then it's a game changer. So got a template, we'll dive into that. And then new credential is just a function to quickly create a credential with a secure string for whenever I need it on the spot for a commandlet that requires a credential. I can save this maybe at the beginning of my session or sometime during that work and then reference it later. But I don't have to type in all the extra stuff to use the secure string formatting and everything.
For this, you can definitely, I think you should have a look at the secret management.
I do need
module.
to, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
For storing that at least in the secret store. I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's the next step. This is more just for like a quick, short credentials that aren't in the store yet. So.
Yeah. So I just posted the module in the chat for everyone. It's from Jeff Hicks also. WT Toolbox. It's I think it's 3 years old. You should definitely check out what is going to work because they added so much new features to the terminal, like the snippet support and so on. So I think that is not implemented, but I think it's a good starting point.
That sounds very interesting.
Your thing.
All right, I'm going to switch to VS Code and walk through some examples. And I don't close the wrong thing. There we go. I was going to try to use the app called Region to Share.
Okay.
It's where you basically draw a rectangle around the window or the portion of the screen that you want to share, but it can be a little tricky to work with if you're juggling windows. So I'm just going to switch to VS Code. Can you all see that now?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Just make it one font up, I think. Or is it
One bigger?
Yeah, just for the audience, is it good? Or is it? I think it's better than now, right?
Good.
Yeah, perfect. Good.
All right, my module structure here. There's a lot going on, but I'm making use of the Contesta module creation framework. And I'm just going to drill into my source folder, the name of the module, and then the public functions. And here's the list there. So, okay, show of hands. Do we want to look at code more or running it and see what it does?
I think a good mix is good, I think. So, or
I'll do a mix.
What does the audience think? Code, action, or both? Mix. Okay.
Mix sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do that. So I'll start just by looking at the code right now for initialize PS environment configuration, and then we can go from there. I'll hide the folder view and shrink this because this is doing a lot of stuff that I've already set, and you can peruse the comment-based help as you want. Side note, I I forced myself to get used to having PS script analyzer run with the default rules on all of my functions. And that's another way that I was forced to actually learn quite a bit. I do think once in a while there are good reasons to use exceptions or to suppress the warnings that it has, especially when it comes to write host if you're doing an interactive script. But I'll walk through, I guess, real quick what this one is doing, because again, my goal here is to configure my PowerShell environment, and I rely on GitHub for version control. So I need to configure Git, make sure that's set up. And so the first thing I need to get is my name and my email address. So it's prompting for that. And I'm going to do a quick point out here that I'm a big fan of using this little .NET type to validate email addresses instead of trying to mess with regex. We've all seen the memes and jokes about regex for email addresses, and you don't need to do that work unless you have strangely specific needs. This .NET type and the method here, or I guess constructor is the right term. Disclaimer, I'm not a trained developer. I've learned as I went. So I might use the wrong term when I'm getting into this .NET space. However, this is a really cool way where using validate script in the parameter that accepts an email address is going to throw it into this .NET type and try to create one. And if it fails, it has an error because it's invalid, then this validate script will fail. But if it works, then it passes and it will save that email address into the parameter that I'm using. So that's one of my, I don't know, I enjoy that one. Now, I also make use of a trick that I believe I learned from Mike Kanekos a while ago, where I like to do one central profile. And whether it's, you've got the different all users, all hosts, current user, all hosts, the different hosts and all that jazz. And I don't want to mess with customizing them all very much or worry about loading multiple profiles. So I basically dot source everything into one profile that I actually have in my own repository. So that repo is synced to GitHub, and then on any other computer, I can pull that in and use that on any computer without having to modify anything. So I haven't fully automated that process, but we've got a parameter in here for that dot sourced central profile and a parameter to set my console font. And I do have a different function that entirely that does this, so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I'll basically just show that I'm quickly offering any font that has mono. I'm looking for monospace names, fixed space names, or fonts that I know are going to be a nerd font or something that's good for coding and terminal work. So that's an argument completer.
Can you just, for the audience and for the recording, explain what an argument completer is, so that we are on the same page?
I will try. Yeah.
Okay.
So an argument completer, in short, helps you to set up tab autocomplete with a dynamically generated list of objects. So doing, do I have an example up here? You could do a parameter validate set. We've got a set of numbers or strings, and you just define them. And that's easy. It's very simple in a function, but this is one where I want that tab autocomplete to pull the list of installed fonts that I have. And I want those font family names to have to match any of these strings. So whatever you have, whatever I have installed for fonts, tab autocomplete is going to offer that entire list. And I'll demo that on my font script in a few minutes because it does the same thing, but slightly more.
So don't feel that I want to put you on a test, but that's a really cool tool that you have in PowerShell, this argument thing. Yeah.
It is. And I will say this stretched. I still don't completely understand the right way to construct these, but I was able to at least get it enough to make it work pretty reliably. So, moving on to the next, I've got a few initial packages that I want to install. I do have more for my typical, but this is just kind of a really basic starting point for winget packages. We can skip some, we can pick some additional ones from a list. And then again, my must-have PowerShell modules that I always have in any environment. So I'm going to be installing completion predictor, which is magic. I love it. The console GUI tools, which basically gives you the new TUI version of Outgrid View, PS resource get, PoshGit, PowerShell for GitHub, and terminal icons. So we all have our favorites, right? That's what I'm starting with, and that's the concept. I'm going just from there and setting up.
Just a question: what is the difference between pick packages and install packages? So you have you have a list, and what is the pick concept that you?
So the pick modules, that's a switch parameter, and that one is going to launch console GUI tools in a grid view and give me a list of modules and allow me to select which ones I want and which ones I don't want. So it just makes it interactive.
Okay, and the same for the applications, I think, right? Because I think you also have
pick packages.
Okay, and these are the packages that you presented in the argument completer, or where does this list come from?
That is a good question.
Okay.
I have up here. Maybe I can make the comments better here, but packages is maybe I'll say winget packages to install. So if I don't include any parameters, it's going to install those 4 packages as my default. I can skip packages and not install any of them if I include this switch.
Okay.
But yeah, so if I do pick packages, then that one's going to launch the console GUI tools grid view and allow me to pick which ones I have. And that one, you know, I'm trying to determine how I want to present that or which ones I want to include in that list, because I could put a long list of my favorite 25 modules maybe in that, and then just pick on the fly for that environment which ones I want to have.
Okay, so you made that up for you have a list of packages 100, and then you have a specific workstation where you say, okay, I only want to have terminal and all my Porsche installed, and then you can pick from this list. Okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And the same thing for my modules. I've got the default list. I can skip installing all modules, or I can build out this list where I can allow myself or the user to interactively choose from a list which modules to install.
Do you also support module installation pre-releases? So because you can use install module or install PS resource with -allow pre-release, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think I have that selector in here yet.
Okay.
But I can see how that could be useful, if certain ones are still only pre-release, but you want to use it, or if you want to test a new version of the Entra module or Platypus. So yeah. So yeah, I definitely love any ideas that you think of or anyone in the group thinks of for what else could be or should be included in this and how to build it out, because the process of creating this it's as fun as it is potentially useful. And then the rest is, I almost forgot about these. A lot of this is already in my profile actually, but for times where I don't have my typical profile, this might be helpful. So I've got some PS default parameter values that I like to rely on, and more important for Windows PowerShell, setting the default encoding for output to be UTF-8. And then if I'm running, well, this depends on which version of PowerShell we're in, but again, I love PS Readline's ability to track history and to suggest the command that I want to run. So my history settings here, these don't matter which version we have, actually. Okay, so I didn't do the version. If you're using the completion predictor module and PS Readline's ability to suggest commands, in Windows PowerShell, you can use the suggestion based on your history of past commands. But if you're in PowerShell, is it 7.2 and higher? It'll actually get information from your modules to throw in autocomplete suggestions. So another reason to do PowerShell 7 if you're not already on that. And I borrowed this from Sean Wheeler. This is a neat PS Readline handler that it doesn't add the command to your history if the length of the line is less than 4 characters.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I thought it was cool because if I'm just doing GCI or LS or take your pick, it's probably not a very meaningful command in my history. And it's one more thing to keep that file shorter. And more useful. I just looked at mine this morning and there were 30,000 lines in it. So I can't walk you through precisely this code with confidence because I didn't write it, but it's not too hard to roughly follow the concept.
Just one tip: if you go up to your PS default parameter values,
Yes.
the convert to CSV in PowerShell 7 does not have this parameter no type information. Because in PowerShell 7 they removed it and
that's a good point.
They used a parameter include type information.
I love it.
Yeah. So I just checked it off screen. So it's also the same if you use export CSV in PowerShell 7. They removed the no type information. 5.1 you have to write it. So I think you have to ask which PowerShell version you are on, and yeah.
Cool. Thank you for that tip. I never noticed that. I've never had an error as a result of this, but that's good to have things to be version aware whenever possible.
Yeah.
All right. I should probably somewhat limit how much time I spend on this one script because there's some other fun stuff, but yeah, I mean, you get the idea. There's this is I'm trying to set up almost everything when I get on a new machine and I'm launching PowerShell, and I just want it to be my familiar preferred settings. And this is a neat way of doing it. And there is some, I'm looking for anything that is Windows PowerShell by looking at the version number. So I can set that prediction view style and the prediction source. So I did have that in here. I learned about Linux and Mac having a different module called Unix tab completion that gives Unix style tab completion. So I threw that in there as well. And there's been a few steps throughout the creation of this module where I realized just a little bit of a tweak can make almost any script cross-platform compatible, which is a really cool realization. So trying to include habits in how I build scripts, even if I don't think I'll use them on Linux machines or Mac machines, I try to write it to work anywhere because you never know. Or just creating that habit so when I do need to create one, I won't accidentally do the wrong case or things like that.
So in 7 you have 3 variables: is Linux, is Mac OS, and is Windows. They will return false or true to you depending on which OS you are. Just for clarification for the recording. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I am going to keep going down, and the rest is now we're just talking about doing what we've described, installing the packages, setting the font, and actually, don't ask me to explain this, but this is where we're actually building and registering the argument completer for my font autocomplete up above. So there's concept 1, initializing my environment configuration. Yeah, save that. This one's fun because, like you guys, I write a lot of scripts, and I sometimes forget to use this because you just start going. But as I mentioned earlier, I want to try to be consistent and have a good structure for everything. And this is one of those functions that Jeff gave me some great feedback on. I need to make the time to integrate his suggestions because they were great. But on this one, I'll do more of a demo. Basically, I'm taking parameters and building them into a here string, which I'm not a big fan of, but sometimes they just work. And we're going to make a script out of a template that right now is in this here string. So one concept that I thought of this morning that I wanted to create a script from a template. So I'm going to actually add a new function to this module right now. I'm not going to publish it yet, but we'll go into the right path and all right. So I'm going to save a little bit of time and paste in here. I was thinking that paste didn't work. All right, I'll type it. Script from template. Name. I wanted to make a function to edit my history file. I'll give it an alias because it's a long name too. I'll call it edit history file and author is me. Live demo, I'm glad it worked.
Perfect.
Okay, now we can look at what that actually created. I'll just do code. There we go. So almost everything here is ready to just start editing it. I've got the function name automatically in there. Let's actually look here. The file name is automatically set. We've got the synopsis, description, no example yet. I'm not going to try to automate that, but my name defaulting to a 0.0.1 version with today's modified date and an advanced function ready to start using. So this is how I like my functions to look. And I actually have the next step. So it's probably not going to paste right again. So we'll type it in. That one's going to be get. And throw a code in front of that. And that should work. Now we could wrap it in a try catch and try to check to see if that exists. If you have any other suggestions for this script, feel free to throw them in the chat. We can do a little bit of pair programming if you want, but I'll just import that and then let's run it. So I cleared my history file this morning. So now it's only 5 lines instead of 30,000. But here you go. You can see it pulled the PSPreworkout history file. And in this case, it's the Visual Studio Code one because that's the shell that I'm in. And I had another fun idea this morning as I was playing with this one because it's just a plain text file. But if VS Code could actually see that this is the PowerShell language and give me syntax highlighting and everything, that would be really cool. And I could manually change that once I've opened it, but I want to automate that too. And again, disclaimer, I did not know how to do this before this morning. I borrowed some code and I found, actually, AI helped me with this bit. So apparently you can run scripts and have launch VS Code and do stuff using its API. And so I'm just going to paste this in actually. All right.
So you just created some TypeScript and called the TypeScript then.
Yeah.
Side. Yeah.
And again, I didn't write this myself, so this isn't something I can teach. But basically, I've got my file path that I want to open. It's that history file. I'm launching code with that file path, but then it's going back and doing this TypeScript here, where it's got VS Code. It's setting the language, all of that down here to be PowerShell. It's actually saving that script to a temporary path. And now that I see this, I actually want to do some cleanup and remove that temporary script after, but I'll get back to that. And then it's running the process down here using Node.js actually. So it does depend on that to be already installed, but yeah, it's running that temporary script for that file. And now if I run this, it does what I want to do. So I'll just switch and run it from that other location. There we go. Okay, that works this morning, and it's not working now. I will get back to that. It's maybe because I already had sourced that script from a different location. So
strange, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's what I get for trying to do a live demo and coding on the fly. But this is, I'm going to add this to my to-do list. This is just a last-minute addition that I think could be really neat, and I'll keep working on that, and you'll see a new version soon where we can check to see if Node.js is installed, and if it is, then we'll get, syntax highlighting in the history file if you ever feel like editing your history file.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's impossible, but it would be really cool if it's not required to have Node.js installed, because I don't know if every PowerShell person has that.
I agree. Yeah. I very rarely use it myself.
And also would be cool if we have some kind of a search, a history search, for example, with a TUI and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So can be also can be also. I think there's someone exists already out there, but yeah, that could be good. And just selecting this and opening a file and so on with the selection or return selection then and so on. Yeah.
I wonder if that's included in the PowerShell run module that I think it's made by Medgers or MDGRS.
Yeah.
I think that does what you described. So
yeah.
We'll get a link if you haven't used that. Definitely check it out. It's a really pretty module.
I want to check it out, definitely, yeah. I will post the link to it in the chat.
All right, let's try to move on to some other interesting stuff. The new credential function does what it says in the box. There's not a whole lot of explanation required there. But as Konstantin pointed out, it's great to use the secrets provider whenever possible. Let's do the console font. Now this one actually does, do I have a note in here? No, okay. Certain version of Windows introduced a new registry key that made this easier. But what this function is doing is lets you set a font for all of your registered consoles. And this works for PowerShell, Windows Terminal, command prompt. I'm trying to remember now if it even worked for the git bash prompt, but I don't recall for sure. So I won't pretend I didn't say that. So This one also gives tab autocomplete for the font parameter, and I like to have it list all of my nerd fonts and monospace fonts on the system. And it's basically using, again, that argument completer for the fonts that it finds. And I'm using regex, which I'm gradually becoming more of a fan of, especially with things like this instead of a really long set of conditions. I never knew how easy it could be to just use match and then a list like this. But then it's just setting a registry key here. So let's try it out. Set console font name, and here we go. So for now, it's just a simple tab autocomplete, and it's going through that whole list, and the completion thing, that's really slick. I love having that. What's the key to show them all? Is it control space? Yes. Yeah, so let's just go with Cascadia Mono. And I'll leave it at that. Show some stuff. I've got a new font, and all it's doing really is, again, setting that registry key. So that one's fun, you know, for styling your shell, or if you have a preferred, or you want to try out new ones, that's great. But again, this here, let me throw the link in here actually. I'll put the nerd font installer script in the chat if I can find the right window. Check that one out. Really neat. I guess I can just run it, right? This one actually is a published script.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So this one gives us, it works in VS Code or in Windows Terminal. And this is a hyperlink you can click on. You can click on this one to go to the source. We've got samples of that font and more information about where it came from. And then, again, this is just to install it. So I already have, what do I have? JetBrains Mono and Meslo. So I don't know, what's Prog Clean Nord font? I'm gonna select 60. Yes. There we go. Now I guess I can use my function here, and let's see, can I start? No, all right. So I'm still learning good ways to work with spaces in tab autocomplete, but I don't yet have a good way to type a letter, press tab, and get it to skip to that one. So, you know, it's in this list, or it should be, but that's the font. Any questions or suggestions on that? Okay, a couple of quick ones that I don't use these very often, but I did mention that I've really started to try to use just .NET types directly in my scripts more often, and especially when it's part of .NET Core. Actually, that's not, I won't go in the .core conversation. So those work cross-platform, and it's really neat. But I often forget what are the ones that are available to me. And so I just made a little function for, what do they call it here?
Get loaded assembly, right?
Get type accelerator is the one I'm looking for right now. It's just giving me a list of the type accelerators.
Okay, cool.
And so these are the ones where I can just start typing and do my tab autocomplete. And for some of these, it actually shows the full constructor. but I think right now it's getting partially cut off. So it's just this one's just a reminder, what's the list of things that I have to work with. Similar, and I use this even less, but I figured I'd still build the script because it was neat. Loaded assemblies, and I can pipe that one to a table to make it readable in a different way. But this would be if I want to do a script that has, imports an assembly. And I don't know if I'll use it, but it's here. It shows me the list. Does anyone use a lot of .NET types or even bring in assemblies for any of your projects?
Yes, I do every day.
Really?
I come
okay.
I come from the .NET world, from C# programming. So
nice.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, another great quotation marks thing where you have module conflicts more often is the whole AZ and MG stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because they are using many DLLs that often conflict with each other. Even in PowerShell 5.1, that happens more often. In 7, they did some containerizing around this to not interfere with each other, but that can happen also. So I think it's a good thing to have all your DLLs shown in the console to sort out which is conflicting and so on.
Yeah. That's a good point. I'll skip around a little bit here, and this one was kind of amusing. I had this idea that if I'm going to work on a server where I can't install anything, but I want to use PowerShell 7, you can actually download a zip file from GitHub and extract it directly, and then run PowerShell without needing to install it, whether it's, there's no MSI involved or anything. So I spent some hours writing this fun script and trying to find the best way to identify, I do have a new version of this code I need to update, but trying to identify what's the latest release of PowerShell, first of all, the latest stable one, and then using the GitHub API to get the link for whatever OS I'm in and the architecture that I'm using, and then pull that one down. So we got it to work. Again, I'll replace this line with the one that actually gets the latest stable tag, and it's getting all of those links from the assets page, and then it's checking my system, whether it's Windows or Linux, slightly different ways to find out if it's x64, AMD 64, or something else. And then pairing that with the OS name to build the actual download name. So this is easier if you know you're going to be on a PowerShell 6 or higher platform. So non-Windows, you're all set. But if you run it from something that is PowerShell, Windows PowerShell, which is kind of the primary use case here, because the goal is to get PowerShell 7, that one doesn't have, in PS version table, you can check what version of Windows or your OS that you're running, and Windows PowerShell doesn't have that. So I'm using the .NET type here to get the OS platform and checking, I think we would call this enums to see if it's Windows, Linux, or OS X. And those seem really fun. I need to learn more about enums. But yeah, so it's combining those to build the link, pull it down, and then different bits to get my, the path where I'm saving it, the file name, the directory, and I don't work with tar zips and gzip very often, so that was fun. More regex, and I've got a section for extracting that file on, where is it? here we go. Extracting it on Linux, extracting it on Mac OS, slightly different, and extracting it on Windows, of course, as the default fail to. So this was, again, a fun learning experience for me because I did half a dozen things in this function that I haven't really done before. And then right as I was finishing, I found in the PowerShell repository some amazing scripts that have already been written to download and install or extract the PowerShell zip files. So it wasn't a waste of time, but it's kind of unnecessary. But that's what we get for having fun writing scripts, right? So there's an aside there. Check out the PowerShell repository itself. And if you haven't, just poke through the folders in there because there's some really interesting examples. If you're trying to convince coworkers to use Linux, PowerShell on Linux, there's a whole folder with examples of things that you can do on that case, scripts for downloading it, and more. But so I left this in here just again mostly as examples, or again to have quickly accessible in a place. If I already have the module installed, I don't need to go to GitHub and get their scripts.
What did you do to get winget running? So I saw you had a function install winget.
I do, and I don't know if I'm going to keep that in anymore or not, because obviously that ships with Windows now, and it's also shipping with Windows Server 2025. But when I started this, I was actually stuck on a laptop that was still Windows 10, and winget wasn't shipping in that release. So I made a function to install winget. Thankfully, very few people should ever need this anymore. And other people have written the same function. Jeff Hicks has one that's even better than mine, of course. But I left it for now because it works, and it was at one point a useful script for me.
Okay.
So experiments. I think I've mentioned I over-engineered a script to install OhmyPosh. There's already a script to install OhmyPosh that Jan has, but I thought, well, maybe I'll make one that you can choose: chocolatey, direct download, scoop, or winget, or the Microsoft Store. This one was more of a waste of time, just doing it for the sake of writing a script a while ago, and it's one that maybe it doesn't need to be in the module, but I left it for now. It works. It's just unnecessary. And a similar really short one: edit your winget settings file. I bet Jeff has one that does this, but this one is just checking. Does a winget settings file exist? If it does, edit in code. If code doesn't exist, use Notepad. Little shortcuts, kind of like editing your history, and that's what I want to try to do. It's not stuff that I do very often, but when I do, I can save a tiny bit of time.
Just maybe find out how what parameters does the winget use to configure it through the winget settings file, and also maybe create a function to edit or to add the parameters to configure winget this way.
Right. And I also really haven't made good use of the winget PowerShell module. So there's a good reminder for that as well.
What's update all the things? Yeah, that's that was the next question that I'm going to ask.
All right.
What is update all the things?
Yeah. So this one was actually the first thing I published to the gallery. I wrote this as a standalone script initially, and I like to try to keep everything up to date as much as possible. I still get that little dopamine hit when there's an update to download. It's like, oh, all right, what's new in this one? I want to try it out. But I started it because just updating all of my PowerShell modules and PowerShell help. I wanted to kind of make that quick, and I often run, winget update all. So I threw that in here as well. And it's just like, what else can I do to run and just update everything on my system? And maybe I'll run it in the background while I'm doing other stuff. And so I've begun building stuff into this with even some extremely basic Mac OS and Linux functionality as well for homebrew packages and APT, which I'm told I need to switch that to, I think it's called DNF. So there's a lot that could still go in here. And I do want to acknowledge the really great package updater. I think it's called Any Package. And that's another module. Let's throw that in the links. So I don't want to replace what that one does. This is really a quick and dirty, what can I get for updates? And so a huge chunk of this code is going to just be doing progress bars, because I decided if you have, this actually inspired a blog post, if you just install the entire Microsoft Graph module and then you install the Azure module, you're going to get, I think it's 211 different commandlets to run, modules, 211 submodules to run. And that takes a really long time to go through the update module process and the update help process. So I've pared that down, but that's part of why I wrote this. And it's why I wanted the progress bars to show how much time you might have left. And it's kind of hard to estimate that because I haven't built in true logic to compare the number of modules installed and the number of packages installed. I'm not sure it's worth it for that. So it's a rough estimate. But we've got sections for updating these, and as well as the option to skip each of these sections, right? So if you skip over all the logic for the progress bars and then the logic to potentially skip modules, I'm just using get installed module to get the count of those that are installed. And I like to use this. This might be, you probably all know this already, but the alternative is to do get module and then list available. But that's going to list all the modules in your system, including the ones that shipped with the OS. And you can't update those. It's also a much longer list. So get installed module actually shows the ones that you've installed, and it's not going to include all those default modules, which helps make the process a little faster. And we could also talk about switching to the PS resource get module and its commandlets. I'm just not confident yet if we have critical mass and people that actually have that everywhere. So it'd be nice to have like a check at the beginning of this to say, is PS resource get installed? If it is, great, update PS resource covers a lot of things very nicely. But right now, I'm just assuming everyone's got PowerShell get installed. And if not, you get the prompt.
Yeah, what could be also be interesting for installing that much modules? I use Justin Grody's module fast to pull the modules or to install the modules very fast. Yeah, thank you for being here, Howard. So that's that can be also a thing, because module fast is very very lightweight, so you don't have to install it, you just bitly it. So that's that could be very interesting.
Yeah, I haven't changed to use that for myself yet. I'm still He still has that don't use in production warning, but I think you could. And I like the fact that he also has built into that one support for the way that you can actually change which path you install modules in, and it will update those based on that PowerShell configuration file. So it's worth using.
So could you show it in action?
I will. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think I've got too much to actually worry about, so I'm just going to do update all the things. You have to have ASCII art.
Ah, okay.
And I try to do as much as possible without requiring admin rights. So, I'm installing my modules in current user scope. I do run this once in a while as admin just to catch packages that require that for a system-wide installer, for example. But it looks the same.
OneDrive will like this.
Yeah. I'm a victim of that. I've got OneDrive syncing on, and for now I'm compensating by checking that box to say keep the PowerShell folder on my system all the time. And that helps a little bit, but I still dream of the day that the PowerShell team and the PS Resource Get team can get together and just change the default location to be more like how Linux does things.
And it's also a good idea to update your production ready server with update all the things, then definitely everything will broke afterwards.
I'm glad you mentioned that. So I tested this just for kicks on Windows Server 2025, and partly because new version that also has winget, and as I was running it, I thought I wouldn't want to run this on a production server. So there actually is some code in here that checks the OS, and if you're on a server, I think I added a parameter and a prompt to say, okay, I just kind of broke everything by scrolling this thing.
That's okay.
There's still some things we can fix there, but I'll skip down to that and that'll reset. So it's updating help right now. And if we skip past the code for help, I should have done a vertical split on the window for this part. We go after help, we've got update winget, and this is just a section where it's saying, is this Windows or is the PS version table 5.1? Then we're going to, okay, actually, so here's the part, I'm going to skip back to this output real quick. Here's the part that things kind of get gross. The console output of winget.exe and choco.exe breaks the rendering of the progress bars. And it's sad, and I need to switch this to the PowerShell modules for winget and chocolatey. But I guess I also would need to add some logic to check to see if those modules are present. So right now it's a minor pain. You'll see as it finishes those, it'll update most of them, and then it can't properly update the progress bar. But that's it. So the modules, the help packages are all updated, and there's not much more to see.
Did you get this help update working? Because I think for help updating, you need admin rights, correct?
Oh, you're right. So good call out. I had forgotten that, but yes, I did run into that, and I think I actually threw in a check to see if you have admin rights and something else. Where is that code though?
Updating PowerShell help. Update help.
Oh, I need to update this because I have it in a draft version that I haven't published yet, where it does check to see if you have admin rights. And if you don't, you're right, we skip update help. But if you do, it works. For Linux, I had to throw in this bit because I was testing it on Ubuntu and WSL, and out of the box, it doesn't actually define your local culture. So I would expect on Windows, for me, it's EN-US. And instead on WSL, it set the LCID as 127, which it basically identifies as an invariant country with no associated language. So it can't update the help.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's why I have this block in here for cross-platform support, where for me, there's some opportunity here, but for me, it just says if it's not specified, throw in EN-US. What I would like to do is add some detections so that if you run it in your system, it would know, oh, it's probably going to default to German, I would assume. So it could use whatever help you need to have on your system without assuming EN-US, because I don't want to assume that. That's just a temporary placeholder to make it work. And I had, you have a thought forming?
No. Sorry, just continue.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for sharing that link to Sean Laurie's module too. That is going to be really interesting when I get to play with it. I just call it Posh Spectre Console. I'm not sure the proper way to pronounce it, but that looks really cool. Yeah, so we're updating help, checking the server bit. Here it is. So if checking the sim instance, if the class operating system has the word server anywhere in the string, then I'm throwing this warning here that this is a server and you might not want to do it. Do you want to continue? So this is a pretty simple, yes, no choice thing. I do want to come back to this again and put in some handling where if I'm not running this interactively, it shouldn't just sit there waiting for input. It should probably default to not, unless you throw in a switch parameter that says, yes, update servers.
Yeah.
So the next version, right? There's always more ideas to add.
And
so
also, I think you cannot think much of the person that sits in front of it, so of the computer. So yeah, because if he or she says update the modules, and they don't want to do this, and then they screw everything up, then it's definitely not your fault. Yeah.
Right. And to that point, it would probably be best just to put in a check and not allow it to run at all on a server.
Yeah.
That's probably the best approach, because none of this takes long to do when you know that you need to do it.
Yeah.
And you don't want to update servers until you know that you need to update the server.
Yeah, so. But even on a client, it can be crucial. For example, if you have if you have to run a report on your on your client, where you install a specific kind of module for a specific kind of version, you tested this, and this module get updated, your mechanism is introduced a breaking change, and then your report is broken. So that's that can also be a crucial. So, but I don't think that you're responsible for dealing with this. So,
right.
The person who uses this should be aware of or should inform themselves about these things. Yeah, and you're also free to skip module update, for example. I think you introduced a parameter for this, right? Yeah.
I did. Yes, we've got a skip switch for all of the sections.
Yeah.
And so I've got chocolatey at the end, and I actually have that because
also.
I didn't like. Yes, Linux also. I should make this an opt-in one because this was just literally just playing with very basic update package and commands that I knew off the top of my head, just to see if I could test the content, the idea on WSL. So if anybody wants to really build that out and with a PR and stuff, cool. I would love that. But at the same time, I think probably, did you already post a link to the any package updater?
I have it open. Yeah, I have it open.
I think I would probably just point people to that instead because it is so comprehensive, and it even includes sub-modules with the concept of being providers for different package managers. Yeah. So that one, actually, I think I was going to say that one deserves a presentation of its own, but I think there's already one scheduled.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, I saw this as a short introduction in the PowerShell core community call. The developer was there. Mm-hmm. I think it's definitely a try to contact him and check if he's willing to do a presentation here, because I think it's a really cool module. Like you said, it's a provider-based installation method. I think he has written many provider to interact with many different sources, like I think Scoop, Winget, and other things, and you can use this module to install the package from any provider he implements. So that's, I think, a really cool solution.
It is for sure.
Yeah.
That is, we're getting to the end here. Chocolate does a lot of the same stuff. It really wants you to run it with admin rights, and so I've tried to disable some of the noise that it uses. And I think this one could benefit more from using the chocolate module itself. But there's something in there, and it kind of works all right. And that's the end of update everything. And it's fun for me. You know, it gets a lot of stuff updated in one shot where I run it maybe a few times a week, or at least once a week when I know that stuff is going to be available. So that was kind of the last big function that I have here. Let's save that. And
can you show us the experience of the most critical thing? So the initialized PS environment. So I think this is the most used thing for your module. Yeah,
we'll give it a shot.
Yeah,
yeah. I haven't. There's probably still some stuff that I could still add to it, but let's see what happens with if I just run the defaults. It should prompt me for my name, and it didn't do that already, so I've already failed. And I should also add a check so it doesn't try to reinstall modules that are already installed. But it can't hurt. You know, it's doing stuff that I already have set, so I don't mind running it.
Okay. Okay. Now there is a new PowerShell release. Nice.
Oh, so this is a funny one. It's not a new PowerShell release.
Oh, okay.
I need to take this out. Apparently, I just discovered this last week, and I submitted an issue to the PowerShell repo on GitHub. I'll say no to that for now. Because when I tried to use Winget to install PowerShell under the current user scope, it installs 7.2.6. And I was really confused because the latest version is 7.4.5. So I opened an issue And what they told me was, if you look at the manifest, 7.2.6 was the last release that actually had a user installer.
Okay.
And so I don't really like how this happens now, because if you tell it to install the user package, you're getting an old version, which at least it's an LTS version for now. And I would like there to be more of a notification or more documentation that say, hey, you're not going to get the latest release because we don't have a current user. If you want a user install, you basically have to install it from the Windows Store, which it's convenient, but certain things don't work as well when you install PowerShell from the Windows Store. One of them is the PowerToys module that helps with suggesting missing commands. It doesn't work if you install PowerShell from the store. So yeah, that's unfortunate that they decided not to include that anymore. I asked for more history around that decision, and they haven't given me that yet. But that's what we got for now. So yeah, this one I should be providing my name and my email address, and I'll be trying to build this out in some way to maybe make use of the centralized .sourced profile, choose which font or which packages, and things like that. Nope. That one I should put a beta tag on and revisit that one.
Yeah, maybe it's also by running it in a fully fledged PowerShell. I think maybe it's something to do with the VS Code PowerShell.
It could be.
Yeah.
I can tell you, this does need work, but there's a little bit of that live demo curse because I know I have run it successfully, of course. So let's try it here. I'll skip some of these. It's been a while. I honestly don't recall if those pick functions are complete. That might be something that I've got to bug in still. Yeah, I think I meant to comment those two switches out to begin with, because they're obviously not ready yet, but everything else is going in. It's doing like the git config and whatnot.
Just some feedback. So I'm not seeing that you are having some kind of logging or tell the user what's happening in this process. Is this intended or?
No, I do like to try to include that, and that's just a sign that I should have a beta warning on that function, or maybe pull it until I know it's really completely tested and ready to run.
And also so if you look at your update, all the things you told the user, first I did this, second I did this, third I did this. That's what I'm missing in the initialized PS environment configuration.
I agree. That does need to get added.
Yeah. So just some feedback, no bashing at yourself. So just not understanding it wrong.
I love constructive feedback.
Yeah,
that's good.
So, anything else to show us?
That's That's my module right there. I'd be, if people need to go, we can wrap up. If anyone has questions, or if you want to talk about the build process or even the repository itself, I'm happy to talk about that. But whatever you would like to dive into.
So we have 15 minutes to ask questions. Do we have any questions? Everyone is silent. Perfect. So there are no questions. Thank you very much for your time,
Thanks
guys.
again.
And have a nice evening. Have a nice day. Wherever
Bye,
you
guys.
are. See you around. Bye.